I'll lead with this before we get back to Beau. This is one of the things that the idea of a completely young X-Men kind of worries me a little bit. In order to explore, I think, with real depth, the viewpoints, the varying viewpoints of these characters and their backgrounds, what do the characters need? Life experience. If you're going to drop a whole bunch of teenage mutants in here, what do they not have? They don't have life experience.
What up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Gen Report. I'm your host, Pablo, and joining me, as always, is Mr. Brian Schultz. Brian, in a long hiatus of an episode, our Beau Knows episode. Lots to discuss. Mr. DeMayo has had a lot to say as of late, but we're going to run down some of the things that we're going to be talking about in this episode of Beau Knows. So there's a lot. There's a lot, Brian. Let's run down the list and talk about it. What were your thoughts on Beau DeMayo's thoughts and words that he's chosen to describe Marvel and their attempt, I guess, to...
Course correct?
Yes. In their course correction and how that is all going to... He has no faith in it. I am little by little losing faith in Marvel's ability to get back to his glory days. Although, you know, I was listening to the Nerdy Basement, shout out to them, that we shouldn't compare what they did with the previous saga. But I think there has to be some comparisons because their attempts have also tried to sort of building on top of each other in terms of storytelling that hasn't actually worked out. They have attempted. They have been trying to attempt the same success, and it hasn't worked out, as we all know. What are your thoughts on all this?
Comparison is inevitable when you have the success that they've had. They also invite it. I mean, look at Doomsday. I mean, how much retread and rehab. I mean, they're inviting the comparison because they won't let go of the past characters. So I absolutely think we should compare them, and we should compare them to the standard they set for themselves. Even if you're telling new stories, there's been a sloppiness and an arrogance and a ignorance to a lot of what they've done in the last 5 years that they just didn't have in the Infinity Saga. And you can point to any number of factors, you know, not some of which are out of their control. You know, you got orders on high and the streaming wars and stuff like that. But a lot of it is self-inflicted. A lot of it is. And so there's a reason why we have several shows asking the question about, you know, should Kevin be fired? And we both recognize, like, when you've had his success, you're not going to just show that guy the door. We get it. The shows are called that more for a point of, there was a period of time where it felt like he was getting a pass. It was everyone else's fault but his. And at some point, you kind of just got to look around and be like, all right, man, everyone wears this to some extent. You can't be blameless. You can't get all the credit when everything goes well, get none of the blame when it goes poorly. And when you start saying some of the stuff that he said, which we brought up in our recent shows, we're not going to let that slide.
Hell no!
Like, we will give you all your flowers when you give us good movies. And to be honest, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, we both feel like we're steps in the right direction, but the audience is saying you ain't there yet. So therefore, we got to look at why.
Or the audience is like, I've had enough.
That's a fair question too. And we can continue to talk about that. But the point is, on the one hand, it's football season. So maybe that's why Beau Knows is back. But apart from that, it's open season on Marvel. And the latest reason why is this: why has Fantastic Four gone from good critical response, good audience scores, good opening weekend, to cratering into irrelevance, to the point where it is questionable if this movie is going to be profitable, which is kind of shocking given where the opening weekend started. This movie will struggle to make $500 million global after opening at just under 220. That's a terrible ratio. Usually you can kind of multiply your opening weekend by about 3 times. That should be about where you end up. So 220 should be 660. 220 becomes 500. That means audiences basically went out, saw it initially, and then told everyone, you good to wait. It's all right. You don't have to go. And so that's why people are asking more questions. We've asked our share of questions, and Beau DeMayo is asking questions. Now, before we get into this, as we've said in every one of these shows, his own situation where he was fired from Disney and Marvel remains pending, remains unresolved. So none of our shows are here to comment on that. We are simply reacting to the creative commentary that he is sharing from his behind-the-scenes experience. And you take that with all the grains of salt you would like, given you know this is somebody who's not in Marvel's good graces and has bad blood with the studio. So you have to kind of put that at the top as a disclaimer. Now, there's 3 main points here. Go ahead.
Okay, before you get into those 3 main points, we also have to sort of take into consideration one of the best parts of Hamilton, the Broadway show. He was where the sausage was being made. He was there.
Yes, correct.
You know what I'm saying? And this is not a political statement here. I know people have their things to say about what he may or may not have done, but given the state and the world that we live in, cannot overlook that part. He's saying what he's saying because he believes in the Marvel, I guess, or the Marvel comics, the characters. He wants these characters to work, regardless of what you think what he may or may not have done. But it doesn't dismiss what he's saying about what he has witnessed and what he has experienced working at Marvel. Continue.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm just saying we're not here to take sides with Beau DeMayo as a person. We're here to react to the comments here and map them onto what we see in the landscape around Marvel. So he basically launched 3 separate tirades, I would say, this week around 3 separate topics. So we're going to try to get to all 3. So number 1 is a dissatisfaction and fear about the live-action X-Men iteration that's coming up, in part due to what he describes some internal politics around his own show, X-Men 97, which we know Emmy nominated. Number 2, he talks about the Marvel process. Basically tries to give you a little window into what it's like to go into pitch to Marvel. And he certainly has names to name, is far from generous in his description of that process. The third is he provides some specifics around his iteration of Blade. We know there were many iterations of Blade. His is nowhere near the most recent, but he talks about his own pitch process for Blade, which is actually a little different than the general pitch process that he's describing. So we have those 3 things kind of on the board, none of which are positive for Marvel. So which one do you want to take first?
With the X-Men 97.
Okay, so let's go with the X-Men. He claims out of the gate that he has no faith in Kevin Feige's ability to bring live-action X-Men back to life, in part because he believes that Kevin Feige is resentful that his own show, X-Men 97, was so well received. That he kind of views that as a threat, effectively, to what Kevin wants to do with the live-action X-Men. So he says, quote, "Before you think I'm being egotistical, I highlight this to say under my leadership and vision, my team and I created a project that resonated with the MCU's core audience, that being X-Men 97, in a way that Kevin and his parliament have so far failed to do in over a decade." That's a little long. 2019 was only 6 years ago. "Instead of looking at what my team and I did and learning to replicate our focus on canon and deep character work, they smeared me, tactically threatened the crew not to speak out while continuing to still abuse them, and have done everything to act like X-Men 97 was not a hit. I have yet to see anything from Kevin and Marvel that shows they respect how much fans have invested in these characters. Now, will this change? I hope so. But as I said, I have no faith yet in the MCU's mutant saga," end quote. So there's your first, these guys hate my show for being good. And basically what he's saying is a lot of people have looked at X-Men 97 as a template. Why don't we do some of that in live action? And he's saying that Kevin hates that narrative being out there because he doesn't want it to compete with what he actually wants to do. That's what he's really saying in that quote. What do you think about that?
Quite possible, because the success of X Men '97, I would say, is a very praised season of X Men '97. People who saw it from week to week had something positive to say, except for probably episode 4, that Jubilee episode. But other than that, Brian, and I think he goes into in prior messages that he's relayed to people about that episode and what they did with that episode with Storm. But if there is across that contrasting idea of what was done compared to what Kevin wants to do, there is worry. There would be worry in Kevin, or people surrounding Kevin, in that X Men '97 was it was nominated for an Emmy, yo. Whatever it is that you're trying to do hasn't seemed to surpass the excitement for the X-Men as X-Men '97 provided
Right.
us fans.
Correct.
And so there's a very difficult task that Kevin has to attempt to supersede in excitement and excellence and success. That if he fails, that will be the final nail in the coffin for Kevin Feige, I think.
That's 100% correct. Now, let me give you more quotes about this same topic. This is Beau talking. Let's talk about how Kevin and Nate and Marvel talk about the one thing that's come out of Marvel that was universally loved. Again, he's talking about his own show. Oh, right. They don't. In fact, Kevin and his vaunted parliament at Marvel did not attend X-Men '97's premiere. One of the crew members was in the elevator with Lou, he means Desposito, the day of the premiere, and mentioned it. Lou had no idea what he was talking about. Also, notice how everyone at Marvel talks like Deadpool and Wolverine put X-Men back in the modern zeitgeist? Sorry, that was X-Men '97, and even Ryan Reynolds has acknowledged it. But sadly, Kevin Feige and his sycophants hated that what I created with my team was getting all the praise that it did. Remember, I was told by a top, capitalized, executive at Marvel last year, Kevin resented my work and the show because fans, capitalized, like you, were using it as a referendum on how Kevin's MCU was failing. I was told by several artists on the show they had wanted to post or include blurbs commending me for my leadership and vision and all I poured into the show, only for Marvel to censor or reprimand them. And remember, Jake Castorina was stopped by Marvel in an interview with IGN for, quote, giving me too much credit as a showrunner. And also IGN went along with it, respected journalists that they are. All of this is for ego, and the X-Men have no room for ego. Their legacy and the investment so many of us made into it is what's the priority, not making your mark, end quote. I mean, that's shots fired from all sorts of weaponry in those paragraphs.
Yeah.
Has he said anything there that you think is that off base? We don't know the behind the scenes, right? We don't know that conversation in the elevator. We don't know the stuff they felt about the premiere, but
when did X-Men '97 come out?
It was last year, wasn't it?
And we still have yet to hear anything about season 2. When is that supposed to come out?
It's supposed to come out next year, but obviously, yeah, I mean, we know no new showrunner. We know it's the What If guys. He's mad about that. That's a whole, I mean, he's going to be all over that season when it comes. So he will be giving you he will tell you exactly what his scripts were.
If X-Men '97 season 2 fails to deliver, Brian,
I'm going in.
It'll be hard to ignore what Beau DeMayo has to say about what he was attempting to do rather than what they did. Because they want to they don't want to give him any credit. So they're trying to change everything. And if it fails, Brian, I'm telling you, it's going to fall on the shoulders of Kevin Feige. Because at the end of the day, like you said, you can't take credit for the greatness and then blame people like you've been doing, talking about there was too much homework for the Marvels.
Come on, man.
But it was a dope movie. Don't come at me trying to talk to me about that, man. Come on, man. because you're not being real genuine with me and sincere about that. You can't possibly think that. And that Brave New World comment, we already know what that sort of meant. I'm still waiting for Anthony Mackie to respond or to say something about that if he ever gets asked.
I don't know if they'll let him. I don't know if they'll let him. But to your point, he does also talk about some of the tweaks, right? And this starts to get into the storytelling, right? He said, quote, Kevin is introducing new concepts like adamantium and mutant Miss Marvel while simultaneously recycling old Fox characters, all before telling us they're going to reboot everything anyways. Like, what the F? And then he talks about Kelsey's Grammer's Beast and Monica Rambeau sharing this scene. And he's like, they have no history in the comics. Why would you even choose that route? But what he then says is the reason why they made Kamala Khan kind of the first mutant mention was because of Kevin's obsession with Young Avengers. I find nothing wrong. Like, let's put it this way. The fact pattern of what he's claiming certainly matches the fact pattern of what we're seeing. Like, I think all of us would say Kevin has an obsession with the Young Avengers, which seems out of touch with what the mainstream audience wants to see. How many times have we joked on this show? I mean, since we're talking about X-Men 97 and the 90s X-Men show, I mean, how many times has he dropped that theme riff, like in different projects, just to let you know, hey, 90s X-Men theme, without it really actually going anywhere. So I can't quibble too much with these statements. At least this part of it, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of with him on that. I'm not seeing the groundwork being laid that makes me super duper excited for how they intend to retcon or rework what it means to be a mutant in the MCU. I mean, remember, there was even a debate whether they were going to use the word X-Men. Remember that? In like the height of certain things mattering, there was a talk that they were going to get rid of the X-Men because it had men in it.
And it's like, when I think about the X-Men and what this mutant saga looks like, to me it looks like where humans, black and white, that I have a dream speech comes to life, and one thing that they can agree on is that they hate mutants. We can see black men and white fighting side by side, but they're fighting against mutants. That's the sort of world of the X-Men that I want to see. And so when they talk about getting Denzel Washington and just tweaking certain things, it just doesn't work for me. And I think a lot of people out there would agree. And if not, please comment in the comment section below and let us know your thoughts on that. Don't just say you don't know what you're talking about and leave. Tell me or tell us, how would you go about this? But continue.
Well, we're gonna do a show where we basically, this is not about actors and casting. We're literally going to try to build our view of how you should put together the mutant saga. That's coming in a future show. We'll put together some steps. We both have some differing viewpoints on how to get there. But listen, there's no richer text. We talk about the ills of politics and messaging and themes, different types of themes. The X-Men is all about that. Like, you have carte blanche to have a real conversation on both sides of that aisle if you know how to write and tell stories, because that's what these stories have been about for decades, right? Charles Xavier and Magneto, like, those characters are tremendous vehicles for having different viewpoints of the same issue. And as you said, obviously this is, dates back to the 60s, so naturally you have this backdrop of civil rights and this backdrop of sort of discrimination, but it's like, people that want to, look at today's world and say, look, you could obviously modernize in today's world. A lot of those themes are still very topical, right? And so it's like, this is not about picking a side necessarily in your storytelling. It's about presenting through your characters multiple sides, multiple viewpoints, multiple layers, and how those align and conflict. That is of interest to audiences if you do it well. If your objective is to say, look, we're going to go one direction and one direction only, and we're going to deliver that and beat you over the head with it, I can tell you what your box office is going to look like before you even start. Because that will dishonor everything that these characters stand for. These characters stand for conversation. They stand for examination. That's a big part of what makes them interesting. And if you forsake that in the name of other things, I think you are hamstringing the profitability and the potential of this.
The voices of fire Kevin Feige will be much louder than they are now.
I'll lead with this before we get back to Beau. This is one of the things that the idea of a completely young X-Men kind of worries me a little bit. Because in order to explore, I think, with real depth, the viewpoints, the varying viewpoints of these characters and their backgrounds, what do the characters need? Life experience. If you're going to drop a whole bunch of teenage mutants in here, what do they not have? They don't have life experience. I realize that's old parent over here saying that, but like for this particular story, the buildup of Eric Lenscher, the buildup of Charles Xavier, the buildup of Wolverine, of Scott, of Rogue, of Storm, from where they come from, you can't tell me that at age 15 or age 20, they've fully formed all of those views yet. But at age 30, at age 35, age 28, like, yes, they are adults and they can bring that to the table. So we'll get into it. But I already think this whole, like, I get it, they're trying to save money. But age is not the only way to save money. You can find hidden gem actors who don't command $20 million a pop, who are between the ages of 28 and 40, who can portray these characters in a way that is very, very interesting. So I already think the idea, if their intent is to make this a sort of teen bop, 20-something, drama, that's already barking up the wrong tree. But it feels like that is the way they want to go. Anyway, we'll get back. So let's get back to Beau. Okay, so number 2 is the Marvel process. Okay. Before we get to the Marvel process, I have to give you something that Beau said that I almost felt like you and I wrote. Let me just read this. But it'll be a lead into the process, promise. Quote, during phase 1, Marvel's Hall H and press releases were so exciting because they were talking about the comics, the themes, and the stories. They talked about the fans and doing right by them and the comics. Now, their Hall H panels and news is just Kevin and one of his lackeys talking about the latest A-list celebrity who will be paid 8 figures to cosplay as a Marvel hero. There's no talk of actual heroes, character, or story because Kevin and his brood are just star bleeping at this point, hoping to earn dollars at the box office, end quote. I mean, that's, you and I would have written the exact same thing.
Shout outs to Spivey 4994. We talked about it. He talked about it a long time ago. He went Hollywood. Kevin, we talked about it. He went Hollywood. And he hasn't gone back. I don't think he can go back. I don't think he knows how to. I don't think he knows where to begin with that idea of starting something fresh and being, I guess, having respect for the comics book. Because they seem, the people over there at Marvel as of late, seem to not respect the comics, don't want to have nothing to do with the comics, want to work with people that don't know the comics so that they can create their own thing. Which, quite honestly, the percentage for failure is so much higher with that sort of approach.
Oh, I 100% agree. I think he's being forced. So we had obviously he did sort of a mea culpa about that recently, but I think it's because he's being forced off the position by the cut in budgets, right? He's being forced off the place where he can offer those kinds of contracts. So the reason why they're now looking around at a broader swath of actors again and younger actors and different actors is because they don't have the budgets anymore. The budgets might be 100, 125 million, not 250, right? So it's sort of, is he doing it by choice? Is he doing it out of necessity? We don't know. Now, let's segue to the process because that's part of the process, right? The star hunting. Someone asked Beau DeMayo why you haven't gone after James Gunn and Superman and the DC crew. And he said, well, the answer is, quote, I've never worked with Gunn or DC. But like Matt Shackman and the writers of Fantastic Four, I have sat in the creative meetings at Marvel Studios. They're horrible. You basically sit in a room with Kevin Feige and Lou D'Esposito and try to pitch your movie while also realizing that Kevin just wants you to dictate his rushed thoughts. Victoria used to be, meaning Victoria Alonso, used to be in these, but Kevin and Lou had so mistreated her that in one of my meetings, she just showed up with sugar cookies she baked to help improve the morale. You're even told not to try to pitch ideas from the actual comics because Lou is not a big comics guy and it will turn him off. You sit and talked about craft and story and characters only to have Kevin and Lou say, yeah, well, all we need to make All we need to do is make sure it's fun. There's no spark, there's no vision. Marvel is a slaughterhouse factory where you watch fresh meat get spoiled as it slowly makes its way through the assembly gears of mediocre thinking and this weird hatred for their own product. And that's why Rob Liefeld, Deadpool creator, isn't just some bitter old man. Talking about the comic book writers is met with open contempt. I had to fight to get the levels involved on X-Men 97, and even then the dismissive news with which Dana Vasquez Eberhard spoke about them, basically telling me the OG creators were meant to be seen and not heard to appease the fans. I even remember wanting to talk to Chris Claremont, famous writer, and being shut down, or wanting Joe Madureira to do posters just as I was being scolded for being too friendly with fans or coming off too much as one, end quote.
What has happened in the last couple of weeks? I can tell you one thing, that for the first time, DC has beaten the MCU at the box office.
Oh, yeah. Nitro has beaten Raw in the Monday night ratings. Exactly what has happened.
What has been James Gunn's approach? Based on what Superman has done and the sentiment that there is out there for Superman, if you read the comments, people out there love this movie. And again, I say to that is, I think people, especially Superman fans, appreciate the direction James Gunn took than what Zack Snyder did with Man of Steel. There is a open praise for the direction and the detour or the course correct that was done with Superman, and they have applauded James Gunn for that vision and for that treatment of Superman. And for the most part, most people seem to agree that this is one of the most comic book movies we've ever seen. So this is the sort of the two approaches that we're seeing, and the tides have turned, Brian.
This goes back to our Gunn versus Feige, where we kind of were like, you know, they are friends, and in theory, they are rooting for each other. But like, you're starting to see, as we always talk about, this is why I'm going to keep the wrestling theme. This is why they get on mic and they start sniping each other, right? Because it's like James Gunn's over here saying, like, I'm about finished scripts. I'm about writers. I got Tom King, comic book creator, in the room with me. Like, who do you think he's talking to? He's talking to both the people out there who could come work for him, but he's talking to Marvel, saying, I worked there, and I'm doing it different than you because of my experience there. If you can't understand that, then you're not paying attention. And then when
I don't know,
and then when Kevin comes back in his interview and says, we love our way, fine, thank you very much, and then says, oh, by the way, James, you used to be like that too. Don't tell me you're not. What do you think Kevin's doing? He's basically saying you're a hypocrite. That's what he's saying in a very gentle way. He's saying you're a hypocrite.
Yeah, but here's the thing with James Gunn and his involvement in the MCU. He was a piece. He wasn't the piece.
Oh, yeah. No, yes, exactly. Rise of the MCU makes him sound like he's a script doctor. Other than Guardians, he's a script doctor.
What is James going to do? He's probably going to have his say and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, who's in charge?
Yeah. But this is definitely a little bit of, the war for talent, right? The war for real estate, where they're kind of saying, I want that next big writer. I want that next up-and-coming star. I want to be the first call for them. I want to be the first call for that. That's what they're after. And it used to be Marvel was everyone's first call. And now after Superman, James Gunn can kind of plant a little bit of a flag and say, and it's weird because it's not like the box office for these movies is don't get it twisted. It's not going to be massively different, right? Superman's going to be at 600. Fantastic Four is going to be at 500. Thunderbolts and Brave New World at 400. These are not, we ain't talking Avatar dollars here, right? But as I said to you when we were talking about Fantastic Four, that buzz, you can feel it at Comic-Con, the standing O in Hall H for James Gunn. The buzz is going DC's way. It is. It's the up arrow. They have the up arrow. And even though Marvel made a couple of pretty good movies this summer, I think movies that are underrated, the arrow is still pointing down. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah.
There's not. Like, you and I can sit here and say we gave Fantastic Four a higher rating than Superman. I'll stand by that. But we always say numbers don't lie. Yeah. The audience, the mainstream audience, especially in the U.S., kind of said Fantastic Four was a lukewarm pass. Whereas Superman, they said, no, I might have to make some time to go see that movie. And I liked what I saw.
It's a new experience. It's not Marvel. You know what I'm saying? It's Superman. It's a big deal. Again, it's not Marvel. It's not Marvel property. I think any Marvel property that comes out now is looked at as, I don't know if I'm going to go see it. Whereas this new stuff over here, DC is making its voice heard much more louder because it's much newer and different approach and different things that we're going to see rather than the same more sort of formulaic things that we've seen with the MCU.
So I think James Gunn bet on one thing that he has been validated on that I would have questioned going in. Superman, it's funny. Remember how one of the critiques we were talking about with Superman was just like how the credit scenes didn't go anywhere, right? We're kind of like, why do we have these? And they don't. But I had said at the time, well, the real credit scene is the Supergirl bit. But I think if you zoom out, there's actually like 10 credit scenes in that movie, right? Because all the characters that sort of come and go. James Gunn made a bet that basically by doing that would provide that propulsion that we are going somewhere. Yeah. And he bet with like Eddie Cathegi and Nathan Fillion and Isabel Merced and Millie Alcock. He was betting that would be a place people would be interested in going. I think he has been proven right enough on that point, and I think we'll find out, certainly with Supergirl in particular, how right he is. But I think that has turned out to be a novel bet. He effectively took the credit scene and made it sort of like a here. There's a bunch of strands here that I'm not going to give you backstory for. But if you like what you see, right? I use Mr. Terrific as the best example because he kind of had the biggest part. But like, if you like what you see, there will be opportunity to revisit that in my universe, this bigger world that I'm introducing to you. I mean, that bet seems to have paid off for the moment. Now, I want to get back to Beau's comments because we do need to say one thing here. If we take everything Beau DeMayo said at face value, that's how they do it, obviously it doesn't sound very friendly to creators. However, let's also not forget that if that is the actual process, it is the same process that was averaging, what? Over 20 some odd movies?
$1 billion.
So I am going to say before, let's pump the brakes a little bit to just say whatever they were doing in that room was cranking hit after hit after hit at a ridiculous rate for a number of years.
Even though perhaps some of them didn't deserve that sort of success.
Correct. And they were very good at figuring out when things didn't work, how to kind of get the train back on the tracks, which, Thor Dark World's a good example. Like even like Iron Man, they figured out like along the way, movies that were less than successful, how to get. So I am going to say, this is one area where I'm like, Beau giving us that insight is interesting reading, but here's one time where I got to say like, okay, but whatever that process was worked to a level we have never seen a studio process work before. So we do have to acknowledge that. And conversely, everyone's high on James Gunn's supply right now. But I need to point this out. The DC universe as it stands today is the output of only one man. Let's be honest about that. Creature Commandos is a James Gunn creation. Superman is a James Gunn creation. Peacemaker is a James Gunn creation. We have yet to test whether he can broaden the universe to other creators. We are optimistic about Supergirl. We are optimistic about Lanterns. We are optimistic about DCU Batman. But again, do not get it twisted. As it stands today, the DC universe is not really a universe. It is from the mind of one man only. And that is also generally not a sustainable way to put out product after product after product for year after year after year.
And we'll talk about that later.
So I just pointed that out before everyone gets all, hey, let's just pile on Marvel. Let's be like DC can do no wrong.
But I remember my prediction.
I'm high. Listen, I'm with you. I think Supergirl is going to be good. But we'll talk about later on. We got a DC thing like, Clayface. Like it's coming. The test is coming, right? These projects are in the pipeline. But for this universe to work and to really stand apart from the MCU, to avoid the MCU formula, to avoid that slaughterhouse factory that Beau DeMayo is describing, the universe of DC has to have range. It has to have other creators who can come in and operate and feel like they're putting their stamp on characters and films and viewpoints for it to really be what James Gunn is telling you it's going to be. Because if it's just James Gunn oversees everything and James Gunn rewrites everything and everything becomes his motif and his humor, we're going to get bored of that too. I can guarantee you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What else?
Blade. The reason why I put this after the process, Beau DeMayo talks about pitching his version of Blade. And in this one, Kevin Feige actually gives him praise. That's what's kind of interesting. And he talks about how his version doesn't work or doesn't happen. So he said, quote, "One of my drafts opened with Deacon Frost tricking British explorers to trek up to Mount Wundagore, where he does blood magic to reveal the vampire spell used by Varney and his followers during the days of Kull. To start tying some of those threads together, I even had the same monsters from Doctor Strange show up to kill the explorers before Deacon reveals he's a vampire and kills them. That was set before Doctor Strange 2, so a lot of stuff played ironically, while also having Frost give us details about Thawne, who we only glimpsed in Doctor Strange 2. To Kevin's credit, he liked this idea, as well as my pitch that magic is to Blade what snakes are to Indiana Jones. He hates magic. But Lou felt it was too comic book, while Mahershala bumped on there being too much magic in the film tonally. And then I watched as them and Nate Moore picked it apart, and we were off to a new draft, end quote.
I think Beau DeMayo's approach, anything to help make sense of this vampire thing, I think would have helped it along. One of the things that has been said about the approach to Blade and the explanation to vampires has been a topic of discussion that has been sort of an enigma for them to figure out on how to best tell or explain this world, in the MCU world. I think, Brian, that because we've gotten Echo, because we've gotten lackluster shows, that they are unwilling to make an attempt or take a chance on something that we think could be massive, visually enticing enough for us to want to go check this out. I think Blade is that movie, but they have no interest in the character as of now. There are other things on the priority list that they're trying to figure out, and Blade is not one of them, and it will be figured out, or at least I think considered, after the reset and after Mahershala Ali taps out.
I totally agree. What's interesting also about what Beau is describing there in his pitch is that he is trying to solve the problem that you're talking about. So you can kind of hear it in his pitch. He's using Doctor Strange and magic as his entry point to vampires. That's effectively what he's telling you, right? He's like, I realize there's an issue here. I need to cross this gap to get to Blade, and I'm going to use Doctor Strange 2 and magic to get there. That's his pitch. And he's kind of saying Kevin was on board with it, but Mahershala wasn't, which I think is interesting. He kind of saying that Mahershala was sort of like, I don't need magic to be a part of my movie. That's an interesting subplot to this, in terms of like, we've always wondered, like, how much was Mahershala in the room, and like, where did his influence peak and where did it fade? Well, here's one early iteration where clearly he was in the room and clearly he did have a say, and at least according to Beau DeMayo, was a large hand in sort of quashing magic as sort of a leading theme of his movie. Now, did you hear the thing? So when we talk about shows that are going to come and go that nobody cares about, you know how Marvel Zombies is coming? There's a rumor that Mahershala Ali is voicing a zombie Blade in that show. Is that, like, on the scale of insulting, where is that? Like, you're supposed to be the 2-time Oscar-winning headliner for a live-action Blade film, and you get a whisper in a credit scene of Eternals, and you get to play a zombie version of yourself in an animated show? I'm telling you, man, that fits with our thesis. They're trying to push him out. They're like, here's what we got. Here's what we got for you. Like, you got to find this clip. Remember in Tombstone when they meet Doc Holliday with that Billy Bob Thornton is kind of shaking down people in the saloon, and after a while he gets rid of them, and then Doc goes,
"Oh, Johnny, I apologize. I forgot you were there. You may go now."
And we got our answer, by the way, with his legal situation still pending. We were wondering, would he go quiet? I think we have our answer.
I don't expect him to go quiet. And the fact that Marvel hasn't said anything about it, hasn't put out a statement or nothing, is just opening up a can of worms if they decide to do so. And they're playing it like, as if he doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And they're just going on with their business. And yet people are, taking note of what he's saying. Again, despite whatever he's done, he's not, this is not about that. This is talk. This is about the process at Marvel and what they've done and haven't done. And what's at stake when they do go their way and we get what we get. Listen, man, nobody can sit here and tell us that What If season 3 was good. That wasn't an abomination.
Weird, because parts of season 2 felt like they were trending up, and it just like went off a cliff. That show remains a massive underachieving idea to me.
Yeah, man. Let us know in the comment section below what you think of the latest in the Beau saga. The Beau saga. Because, again, you're going to listen to those people who are there, who were inside. You're going to listen to what they have to say. Because it's not like he's a fan and he's sitting outside and he's telling you what he experienced there. And how do you not take it under consideration when we see the response that Marvel has gotten for their IP as of late? And I wanted to state something when you were talking about the connection that he was trying to make with Doctor Strange and the magic and stuff like that. Let's not get it twisted. The success of Marvel, and especially in the first phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, was all about connection.
It's about connection. It's all about connection.
Without that, Marvel, it wouldn't have worked.
No, because
it wouldn't have worked.
That is what got them through some of the more mediocre product. When you have that kind of momentum, you can survive an average film, and that's exactly what happened. Because people felt like, but I'm going somewhere. I am in, right. It's like, what was that? Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow in the beginning of Dark Knight. He's like, I always told you my compound would take you somewhere. I never said there'd be places you'd want to go, right? It's like, before, it's all places we wanted to go. Now it's like, I don't know if these are places we want to go. Young Avengers, that's not a place I want to go.
And once you go there, it's like, once we go to these places and then we're like, damn, we're here. How do you come back? How do you make fans come back? That's like having bad food at a bad restaurant, known for its deliciousness, but it gets a string of bad reviews.
Well, you don't.
How do you get people back?
That's what happens.
And you rename it
under new management, right? Exactly.
And you change the menu. You fire the chefs.
You sign for it.
No. So yeah, man, this is a very interesting story. We obviously gonna keep our ears open and our eyes vigilant to what Beau DeMayo has to say in order to sort of figure out what's going on here, because something has to give in terms of the success that they want to reach. And Feige, in his, I guess some would say, stubborn ways, will not possibly get us to where we once were. And they can try, but it seems they have been trying in terms of improving quality, but yet still do not seem to be interested, which is crazy because Fantastic Four, man,
Yep.
I can't wait for it to come on streaming.
Well, we're gonna talk about it in our Marvel roundup because the fallout from this continues. I think you're seeing it in real time.
Yeah.
And I think the question becomes, will Marvel stay the course in some of the things that I will say they got absolutely right in Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four? Or are they going to panic? And the early returns would say they are going to panic. So we'll talk about it in our roundup. But
they're going to panic. Yep. So yeah, let us know in the comment section below, and shout outs to BlackRock and all the other subscribers who comment in the comment section below. We really do appreciate it. We really do want to hear what you guys have to say and your thoughts on what's going on in the MCU. So hit that like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time on the Nerd Gen Report.